For most of its story, psychology proved a frustrating endeavor because it was lacking the proper tools and methodology to anchor it in science. Understanding a science is understanding the questions it's asking and the methods used to answer them. The psychology of perception is interested in the relationships between three entities: the stimulation, the nervous system, and of course, the perception. I will present briefly those three relationships, but we will come back to them all throughout the course. So, the first question the science attempted to answer was what effect the stimulation has on the perception. This is the most intuitive question because it does not directly imply any hidden processes. It's the type of question that companies are interested in when they test their product or interface. Can you perceive a difference when looking alternatively at a 4K TV and an 8K TV from the couch in your living room? Would be an example of such question. Those questions describe the perceptual process rather than attempt to explain how it works. But these still are important questions that evoke, as I've mentioned before, different answers from different people. Since exploring this relationship only necessitates to control the source of the stimulation, and since it is rather easy for a participant to translate these perceptions into words to give valuable information, it has been the point of access for a scientific inquiry of the psychology of perception in the late 19th century. This will likewise be your own point of access to start our inquiry starting next lecture. We will see that even though this question has a limited explanatory power, researchers have used it to infer what might be happening in the nervous system. But a real scientific inquiry of the relationship between a stimulation and the nervous system itself, it has required more technological advances, and so it took place decades later. This relationship is more direct because people never truly interact with the world itself, but rather with the representation of that environment that is formed on the receptors. That's why studying the properties of these receptors, along with the subsequent neuronal processing, is very informative, and it actually explains phenomena that the study of the resulting perception could not. A physiological effect could be the increased activation in a certain area of the brain when one is exposed to a certain class of object, like a phase, for example. Of course, studying the physiological effects of a stimulation also has the benefit of being more objective than relying on a person's words. And finally, the last relationship is between the physiology and the perception. Sometimes researchers might be happy with the information from the two previous relationships to explain the whole perceptual process. But the truth is that one cannot prove that the perception is fully explained by the neural processing without controlling directly what happens inside the brain. Of course, this isn't remotely as easy as controlling the source of a stimulation, and so researchers typically test that part of the equation on our unfortunate animal friends. In certain cases, however, it has been possible to stimulate specific areas of the human brain to examine their perceptual function. The methods of neuropsychology will be the subject of our third class. The relationships from stimulus to physiology and from physiology to perception represent roughly the complete perceptual process that we will examine in detail for every modality in this course. My assistant will provide illustrated summaries with additional information, as well as some quizzes on the Patreon to help make this course not only clearer, but also more memorable. Thank you, namaste, and good luck.